that's when community matters to me, because there are days where I do not believe this. I do not believe it. It's too hard. It's too much, whatever it is. And I need someone to believe for me. And that is what community does. Like, community says, I've got you till you can do it on your own again. And I just think, like, that's so beautiful. That's why we need church. That's why we need faith community, because you need somebody to say, like, remember when you had me when I was falling apart? I've got you. I've got you now.
Hello, and welcome to the Shifting Culture podcast, which we have conversations about the culture we create and the impact we can make. We long to see the body of Christ look like Jesus. I'm your host, Joshua Johnson. You know, most of us carry a list of what counts: prayer and the right posture and the right building. The walk in the woods, the deep breath, the question you never asked out loud, those don't really make the list. Well, Natalia Terfa is our guest today. She's a Lutheran pastor in Minneapolis. Her book, It All Counts, began with a memory of being told as a child that the sign of the cross didn't count made with her left hand, and with noticing how many adults are still waiting for permission to encounter God. So in this conversation, we talk about questions as a practice rather than a threat, how to tell human authority from God's authority, what love looks like when a protest turns ugly, why the prosperity gospel collapses at a child's funeral, and how breath and body in creation put us back in our place. So join us. Here is my conversation with Natalia Terfa. Natalia, welcome to Shifting Culture. Excited to have you on. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Excited to talk about your book, It All Counts. When have you been told it doesn't count? Your spiritual experiences, what you've been doing. What was that experience like for you?
I mean, my whole life. I didn't realize, honestly, until I was writing. You know, sometimes you think of a through line, but you don't realize you have a through line until you're in the middle of processing or writing or dreaming. And that I sort of realized partway through talking with a colleague and a friend about this book that was the through line. That was the number of times I had been, from childhood on into adulthood and pastoral ministry, been told that the thing I was doing wasn't right in one way or another, right? So the first story I tell in the introduction is a story about my grandmother stopping me from doing the sign of the cross. I grew up Catholic, stopping me from doing the sign of the cross with my left hand because it's not right when you do it that way. And it doesn't count if you do it with your left hand. And I just remember as a kid being like, but that's the hand I just remember being like, that doesn't make sense. And I was like, wouldn't God know like that I mean it, like, I don't know. And in adulthood, the same has been true. I'm a pastor, but I also have a podcast, and the denomination that I serve in has been pretty skeptical of this podcast as a worshiping community of their own, right? That they're not a church, but they don't quite count as a church. But if you ask some of the people who are a part of that community, it is church. And so it's been the unintentional through line of my life of faith, is that, these things that I love, being out in nature and moving my body and breath practice and, all these different things that I enjoy, the moon, all these things that are a little woo woo, then people tell you like, oh, that doesn't count. That doesn't count. That doesn't count. Has to fit into this like predetermined box. And I've kind of always pushed against that, apparently, which I didn't realize again until I really started going. And then I was like, oh.
The box is easy. It's easy to try to put God in a box. It's easy to try to put the Holy Spirit in the box. It's easy to try to put whatever it is in a box because it keeps people safe.
Yeah.
What have you found as you've actually pushed against the box of trying to like escape it a little bit and see that there is some experience out there? What does it do to the people around you when they're trying to keep things in a box?
So I'll say every time I push on the boundary a little, I learn something about the expansiveness of God that really matters, either to me or to somebody I love. I remember a very specific conversation with my uncle who just said, like, we weren't allowed to ask questions. We just weren't allowed. Like, it was a we don't do that. and how that was so painful for him in growing up because he had so many questions. And it was really that he associated that feeling of like you're not allowed to do it with church when he had all these questions, as if that was shameful or bad. And in a previous call that I was a part of, we would do these quarterly ask the pastor sessions where we would throw out the order of worship and like not do a typical sermon, and we would sit in the front of the room and field questions from the room. And my uncle like almost cried. He just couldn't believe that that was a welcome and encouraged, and it just, and so moments like that where you push a boundary of what people say is, like a lot of you would never mess with the order of worship. How dare you, right? Like, how dare you? But what it creates in the freedom for people to be able to fit into that space is really important. I think the same is true with, if I feel really connected to God in nature, then other people who say, me too, don't feel like if they happen to experience God in the woods and not in worship, that somehow they're less than, right? And so I think anytime you can do that, and it expands who God is for me and for other people, but also is like a really liberative experience for folks to be like, oh, I just think you watch people's shoulders drop, and like you just watch people feel, I think even when people ask questions, they like ask it kind of like you can see it in their body that they're like tense and nervous about it. And when you just welcome it, you watch them just like settle in and be like, okay. And I think what you're saying is about safety. That's true. That yes, boxes feel safe, but also stepping outside of the box and meeting people who are already out there also creates a sense of safety for folks to be like, oh, I can do this. I am welcome. I am allowed. I am fill in the blank. I think that is really good.
Some people say questions and questioning is not good. It's going to like lead you away from access to God, or you're tethered to God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some will say that questions like lead deeper into meaning and like sit with God in a different way. What do you think questions and questioning all of it, like what do you think it is good for? Is it good? Is it something where we have to be careful? What is this questioning, and how is it helpful for faith?
I mean, I think it helps, at least for me, questioning helps me hone in on what really matters, right? So if somebody asks me a question about, can you experience God outside of church? And I say yes, then there's a follow-up question, right? So the follow-up question is either, well, then what's the point of church, right? If somebody then follows that up, then it has to make me say what I think the point, like, then I better know, right? Like, if I experience God in nature, that's fine, but then why should church still exist? Well, I believe church should still exist, right? Like and not just to pay my paycheck, but like because I think community matters and intergenerational community matters, and what we do when we're in a space like that together really matters. And but then if somebody says, "Well, I'm getting some of my community online," I like the follow-up questions to me, like if it's one question, maybe it's not so good, but, like, the follow-up questions help you figure out what it is you believe about God or people or yourself, and I think that really matters, and not asking questions and just accepting whatever you're told, I think I think it limits where God is and where you can experience God, and I think God can be experienced everywhere because God is everywhere. And so if the question is not, "Oh, you can't find God there. I can find God anywhere." Then the next question is, well, then what's the point of these things that you believe are foundational, right? Like why then church? Why sacraments? Why, fill in the blank. And you have to be able to, I think like the work of that is deeply theological and deeply meaningful and deeply spiritual to be able to say, I've done that work. I've asked those questions. I can tell you why I think this thing matters or this thing matters and why this thing might not matter so much.
As we're digging into it and saying, okay, can you experience God everywhere? Yes, you can. Why does church matter? It's because of these things. So church actually matters here. You touch on some things within your book as talking through institutional authority human traditions as authority as opposed to maybe what Jesus has called us to do as an authority and what matters and what counts. How do we start to really decipher authority, human authority, the spiritual authority that comes from God, what actually counts, what matters in the middle of all of that?
My gosh, it's just a little question. My gosh. Oh, so I think this question is particularly important right now when people in positions of power are often saying, like, God said you're supposed to honor those in power, right? You're supposed to honor the authorities, the governing authorities. And it's like, okay, yes, but also, did you read the next sentence or did you read the sentences before that one? I mean, like, context matters. But I think recognizing, like, when Jesus tried to narrow down all the rules, all the human and non-human rules, the rules of God, the rules of the church, the rules that people had made into 2 rules. It was about they were both about love, right? And so to me, it just seems so obvious. I always feel like I can't believe it's not as obvious to everyone. It just feels so obvious to me that, like, if what you're doing is not loving, it does not cause, like, outward expressions of love by others, right? Like, if the thing I do causes someone to feel like they are unwelcome or unloved or whatever, to me, that is not from God and it is not loving, right? If I mean, sometimes people don't experience boundaries as loving, but, like, if the boundary I set up creates life and safety for somebody else and love, then it's a good boundary. If it doesn't, it's not a good boundary, right? And so I think sometimes we can be like, "Oh, I'm setting boundaries," but you're just being a jerk. That's not a boundary. What you're trying to do is create liberation and love for more and more people. And, like, that is what Jesus was always doing, creating liberation and love for more and more and more people. So I just keep I it feels so basic, but it just feels like if the thing you're doing, and a lot of people have talked about fruit, like, if it's not producing fruit, then it's not, but I'm like, "Okay, but the fruit is still all based in love," right? Like, it is about what the product of what you're doing is. Is it death? Is it life? Is it love? Is it hate? Like, it is our society is actually that black and white right now. And it does feel, at least to me, in some ways, it's pretty easy to determine what things are from God and what things aren't.
A lot of people, when they pull on the love thread, they say love but this or that, love but truth, love but justice in some sense. How do we know, like, this is love? You just talked about, like, setting a boundary can be loving and flourishing for and giving life to others and giving life to yourself. How do you recognize love in difficult situations?
All are welcome is a good example of of, like, what does it mean to say all are welcome, but to still set up a list of loving boundaries within that, right? Like, I'm gonna say all are welcome, but you still can't come in here and be racist or sexist, and granted, we're swimming in it all, so it's all there, but that, like, our striving is towards equity and equality and these things that matter to us and to God. And I think we're gonna mess up, and that's why grace matters, but I think that we have a place where we are sort of sharing some basic rules of the road, if you will, right? And I think Jesus made those pretty clear, even when it's, yes, love, it's not but justice, it's love and justice. It's like we are, I mean, at least Lutherans are both and folks. So, like, there's a lot of space to keep adding things, and I think you can add all of these pieces on, but it has to start and it has to end with love. Like, those are the bookends you create. And what happens in between there, whether it's justice work or whatever other work you're doing, that it does have to begin and end with love. And so I think, like, you can go out and fight for justice and be, harm people and be violent and be whatever it is. And I would say, is it loving? Like, is it loving? Is what you are doing? I mean, I think protest is a form of of justice, and there are ways to protest with love, and there are ways to protest without love. And I think was a quick story here in Minneapolis is where I'm from. Things this winter were kind of rough here during particular part of the winter, and I was a part of a prayer vigil at the Whipple building, the federal building, and we were putting up prayer ribbons to represent each one of the people who was being housed inside this building. It was really beautiful, lots of clergy presence and community members present, and it was really beautiful. And there was a group that was also protesting, not as peacefully as this group was. Lots of profanity, lots of anger, I mean, it was just a different vibe. We were on this little walk tying these ribbons, and we kind of were looping, and we got to one end of the loop, and the other group was over there, and it got a little like, and there was a moment where our group started singing, and the really angry group, like, sang with us for a minute. Like, it, like, settled everybody down, and they were singing this song just about, like, it was about love. It was about love and peace and hope, and it was so beautiful, and I just remember being like, "Oh my gosh," like, we just watched love take over hate for a hot second. Like, we watched it happen in real time. Both is protest, right? And it mattered that we were all there, but I think it was really interesting to watch when we all kinda came together and the tone changed. I feel like what happened in that moment, like, changed everybody who was standing there. Like, we became one bigger group kinda doing it all together, and some of them came over and tied prayer flags, and it just felt like love shifted it. And instead of it going the other way, which it could have, I think, we could have all joined in the F-bombs and stuff as ice vehicles were going by, but we didn't, and it was really interesting. I just felt like it was such a good real life object lesson of watching, like, one take
You
over.
thought about that and thought about what happened and how the tone shifted? Like, what was the process? Like, how do we go into situations that are
Yeah.
fraught and, like, there's a bunch of hate spewing, and how do we shift the tone to love? What happened in the moment that made it so? Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening and thank you for supporting the show. If you'd like to support the show and get early ad-free episodes, you go to Substack at shiftingculture.substack.com, and with your subscription, you could have a private podcast feed in your podcast app where you get to download early episodes before anybody gets to listen to them. You could also support the show by going to the support the show link at the bottom of the show notes in the app that you're using right now. That goes to a page that supports the work my wife and I do around the world. That donation is also tax deductible. So if you want a tax deductible donation, you could go there. Or if you want to support the show by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that really helps new listeners find the show as well. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support. And thank you so much for supporting this work so that we could see the body of Christ look more like Jesus.
I mean, it was interesting, like, one person started singing, and there was a group that kinda joined her, right? Like, that was part of it, and then it just felt like at some point, there was more love than hate. And there it just felt like it was like a snowball effect. I mean, I know it's hard when something's coming at you, I it's really hard to stay calm and focused. I think had we kept on talking or trying to stay quiet, that might have not been the case, but there was a counter that felt the singing felt different, right? And it, like, changed the vibe in a way. I'm not sure singing can always do that, but maybe it can. But I do think it was the counter, like, they countered the noise with noise. We were quiet and doing this, like, quiet, peaceful prayer thing, which was really beautiful, but when we got to this corner where the other group was kinda hanging out, it changed because they were not quiet and they weren't peaceful, and so we countered that with something equally not quiet, but peaceful. And so I just wonder, I think when you get stressed out or your body goes into that, like, fight or flight mode, it's really easy to counter it with the same thing you're getting. And I sort of wonder if part of what our call is sometimes is to counter with, what is the loving thing I can do in this moment, right? Can I listen? Do I walk away? Do I sing? Do I, like, what is it? I don't know. It's going to be different in every situation. But I mean, I wore a collar at in my neighborhood where somebody was getting taken by ICE, and an ICE agent ran right at me and stopped when he saw my collar. And I was like, okay. And then I just looked at him and said, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? you know? And my husband was like, what are you doing? Like, it was just like, please, please, I would like you to not get arrested today. But, to recognize what power we hold when and how, and using it for the sake of like acting on behalf of those who are being harmed. But also, I didn't swear at that guy's face, and I didn't counter his violence with my violence, right? I just was like, buddy, like, like this, I'm sure you're better than this, like that was the energy I was going for. I hope he felt it. God is watching you. Big God is watching you energy right there.
You get into situations like that, and you could get to a place where you see injustice happening, where you see something that is really like destroying a community, and you get angry, and there's a lot of like disgust happening, and like you could spew out a lot of hate because of the anger. And there's also places where you have things that you just don't understand why they happen. So you have a number of stories in your book dealing with death, the death of people, the death of a 12-year-old, all sorts of things that are like, why is this happening? This is not right. This is not good. This isn't like, it doesn't feel like a beautiful, loving world where death happens. But unfortunately, this is the world that we live in. A lot of times we could feel anger. We could feel sadness and grief and with the loss. What happens in the middle of that pain, in the middle of the, I don't understand this? How do we reckon with the loss of things, especially when it comes to our faith?
This is where prosperity gospel falls apart so quickly. Because believing that if you do good, you'll receive good, right? If you do it right, you'll get good things in return. You just need to pray harder, believe the right things, say the right things, do the right things. It falls apart so quickly because the world is random. and like there are so many variables and elements you cannot control, and death and loss and cancer is just one of them. And I think so often but I did it all right questions come in those moments of loss that doesn't have an answer, right? So even somebody gets cancer and somebody says, what kind? And they say lung, and they say, oh, were they a smoker? Like, you're trying to make it seem like, well, they kind of deserved it, right? Like, that's what people are trying to do. They're trying to talk themselves into like, okay, because to think that somebody could die of lung cancer who never smoked a day in their life feels too scary and random for us to process. So we try to back our way out of that into blame, or you must not have. I mean, it's all over scripture too. Like, what did you do? You must not have prayed well. Like, Job, what'd you do, buddy? Like, nobody goes through this stuff unless they've done something to deserve it. And I think the answer that God gives in Job is particularly unsatisfying, right? Like, I'm God, who are you? Is like not a satisfying
It's
answer.
not satisfying. It's like, you don't know
No.
how I made an ostrich. So, hey,
Yeah,
don't worry
so
about it. It's a
don't worry about
mystery.
it. I'm like, "Oh, I don't really love." That's not really a great thing to say to a grieving person. But I also think in those moments where life does seem like it's all falling apart, and that the things I believed about, like, I did it the right way, this should not have happened to me, those questions, I think, are in some ways a bid to somebody, like, hoping that someone can say where God still is. And and I think the theology of the cross, right? If I'm going like super theological, the God that stays with us and suffers with us and doesn't leave when things get hard, and doesn't blame when doesn't say, well, if you had only, I mean, like, that is not the God I believe in. And if God were like that, I'd be out. I would not be doing this. I would not be in it. And I think it's too many times where I've sat with families, and and named for them, like, this is hard and it's not supposed to be this way, that's like sometimes good enough. They need somebody to just say. And I remember one time I did a funeral for a kid. You should never have to do funerals for kids. It's just the worst thing. And you never feel more clearly like this is not how this is supposed to go. And I said to the parents beforehand, we were talking, and I just said, like, this is not what God wanted. And they were like, well, if God didn't do it, who did? Like, they were just like, and I was like, listen, if you need to blame God, go for it. Like, God can handle it. And I think the prosperity gospel, or that, like, I did it right, I did the good things, it seems like I can just, silver line my way through anything, and that's not the case. We're allowed to be really mad. We're allowed to be, I mean, I think anger is my primary emotion currently, and, like, to pretend that bad things aren't happening and, like, life isn't awful is a disservice, right? But to say, "I don't know why this is happening, but I promise you that you're not alone," is a beautiful promise that even on the time where your family leaves because the service is over and everybody goes home, you are still not alone. Like, God knows what it's like to grieve and to suffer and to be in the darkness. And so therefore you don't have to do this by yourself. And if you need to be really mad about it, you can be really mad about it. And if you need to be devastated, you can be devastated. But to me, the promise, I think it's Moltmann. I'm not even sure which theologian, or which theologian originally said, like, the worst thing's not the last thing, right? Like, that promise helps me not tip into despair. And which I think is if you're devastated or so rage angry, or it's tough to see where the next day is coming, or if it's tough to see if there's any hope in front of you. I think that promise is like the glimmer, the tiny little piece of hope that can, like, sustain you. Like, you don't need an ocean of hope. You just need a tiny little bit, and that'll be enough. And I think the reminder that, like, the worst thing's not the last thing, that's the whole promise of the whole thing, even when it doesn't feel like it. Like, I just think even when it doesn't feel like, and then here's me just continuing my soapbox of the sermon here, but that's when community matters to me, because there are days where I do not believe this. I do not believe it. It's too hard, it's too much, whatever it is, and I need someone to believe for me, and that is what community does. Like, community says, "I've got you till you can do it on your own again." And I just think, like, that's so beautiful. That's why we need church. That's why we need faith community, because you need somebody to say, like, "Remember when you had me when I was falling apart? I've got you. I've got you now." And it's so beautiful to watch that happen in real time, and it's so beautiful to experience it with people and to be held, like, to hold and be held, right? Like, you get it all. It's just a cycle. Really, that's why I love community so much, and church community in particular.
It has been said that we have an epidemic of loneliness, and we have a lot of lonely people, that belonging is really difficult to come by. In the middle of loneliness without community, if you're alone, that's
Mhm.
when despair can
Yeah.
take over. You've helped people actually build community and belonging in spaces that they can actually do that and connect with people. How do people start to connect to build that community so that when they need to be held, they can be held?
I kinda have 2 answers. My first one is to hold somebody else. I think if you have it in you to help somebody in need, in whatever way that is the start of being held, I think, because it's a intimate relationship with someone to help them when they're not okay. And so whatever that looks like, I think that helps us get out of our own spiral of despair, which I understand. It is easy to sit on my couch on my phone, like, it is easier to do that sometimes. So I get how difficult it is to step out. But I also think there are very few people who are really alone. Just recently, I have a teenager, and she's always like, "They don't like me, they don't like me, they don't like me." That's always her phrase. And then we were leaving her last softball game of the season, and her teammates are all leaving, and they're like, "Bye, bye, bye," everybody's like, "Oh," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, buddy, they all like you. And she's like, it's possible that maybe I overthink things. And I just laughed so hard. I was like, yeah, you think, like, oh my gosh, yes. And I think sometimes we feel really alone, but it is a perception, not reality. And I think there are more people who care for you if you are feeling alone out in the world right now. There are more people that care for you than you think there are. And it does require a step to say, I need help, I need care, I need whatever. And I think there are places you can do that feel less scary. Church is one of them. And maybe that's not true maybe people think church is really scary, but I think churches, even the tiny, little neighborhood church in your community that's just full of people 75 and older, like they are just waiting to love you. And I think they are there waiting to care for you. And I think community like that can be found. I mean, I know the loneliness epidemic is spoken about so much. And I was just talking to my same teenager this last week about how I think some people are choosing it because it's the path of least resistance, right? Like loneliness is actually seems like the easiest thing when it is not good for you. Again, my kiddo is really introverted, so would choose to like sit in her room forever and ever if we let her. We're always like, don't you want to go hang out with somebody? We're just like, come be social. But part of it is like to connect with your people. I mean, there are lots of ways to do that. I think church is one, but I also think community groups are ways to do it. Serving is a way to do it. I think one of my friends here in the Twin Cities has a really awesome ministry called Rec Leaguer, which is just like trying to get people who are new to the cities to like join a fun sport league. And like we're not doing championships here. We're just like having fun playing softball or kickball or whatever. Like we're getting to know people and recognizing like we're going to build community around play and that's a spiritual practice and it matters and it doesn't always have to be church, right? And there's just community everywhere. Like it's pouring out of neighborhoods and areas. I think yoga studios and sports leagues and groups and bookstores. I mean, there's just communities just waiting. And there is a risk. It requires just a step of bravery. But I think there's more out there than people realize too. And I think that's people are longing for belonging and they keep going back to the easiest thing, which is not going to give them what they are looking for.
I do think that people are more risk averse in a
Yeah.
place like America where
Yeah.
they have an insurance mindset of like create like safety. Don't do this thing. This is why we have insurance. I lived in the Middle East. We didn't have insurance in the Middle East. Like there's like
Yeah.
there was a tendency to say, okay, if it happens, we'll deal with it.
Yeah.
And we're not going to think through insurance. I actually think the insurance mindset is really difficult. And
It's so
people
interesting.
often think in America, well, I can't do this because what if they're going to sue me? Like there's like, that's
Yeah.
also another like fear-based thing
Yeah.
that we can't say anything. They're going to sue me.
I think that's really interesting about insurance. Like we're so risk averse. And I am pretty risk averse as a person. Like I'm like, oh, they changed the background of my work, my team work. It's like a base camp, it's called. And they changed the background and I was like, I hate this. Like I don't like change. I don't want to, I just want to learn something new. And so there is part of that like, but it's so good for you, right? Like it's so good for you to take a risk and to push yourself out of your own comfort zone and the well-worn path that you have created for yourself. Like I love a routine. Listen, I'm an Enneagram 1. I love a routine. I love a checklist. And so to dip off that path every once in a while and challenge myself is really hard. And I know how good it is for me. And to put things on the calendar and say, I know I'm not going to feel like going to this book club on Thursday. I know I'm not going to feel like it. I know I'm not. This week is busy. I know what I've got on my calendar, but I'm going to keep it on there and I'm going to go because on my way home, I know I'm going to be happy I went. And like, I just think there's some things where we just have to like, there's a little fake it till you make it, I suppose. But I'm always like, my instinct is to stay at home because I love home, like I love my couch. I love my cat. I love my people. Like I would do that and be perfectly happy, but I would miss out on what I get to experience outside of here too. And like life is more than these this little house with my people in it, right? And so, yeah, I think I really get it. I get that. I get the ease. The ease is there. My friend always talks about the chaise lounge of, white supremacy and capitalism and patriarchy that's just like, "Oh, you're so tired. You've been working, so you just lay down here and don't do anything." But like, you know, resisting these built-in systems, like part of it is found in community. Like you'll find that by leaving the comfortable chaise lounge and going out into the world and meeting people who don't believe the same thing you do and who don't live in the same places you do. And like that's what you get when you step out of what's comfortable into the real world, and I just
Yeah.
think every time you just and like I said at the very beginning, God's already there. So like you're gonna be okay. Like God's already out there hanging out with those people too. And you're gonna be out there. You'll meet God there too.
And you could also meet God in creation. How does that help you getting to nature, to see the trees, to touch the trees, to be
Mhm.
amongst creation? How do you find
Yeah.
God in the midst of that?
Yeah. I mean, I think nature has awe built into it. And I just think we need more moments where we are so small and we feel our smallness in a world that tells you like you are the most important thing and everything you think and post and whatever is the most important thing. And I think creation reminds you like you are a part of this big beautiful thing. You are not it. You are just a part of it. Like I mean for me creation especially I where I live here in Minnesota like the cycle of things is so good for me to notice, to be present, to see how nothing stays the same and what looks like death is never death. And like, spring really does feel like resurrection and like all of these pieces, feeling looking up at the sky or I love to stand under a tree and look all the way up. Like it's just the thing I love to do. And part of that is like it's a grounding practice that makes me be exactly where I am right when I'm there. Like you can't really walk around looking all the way up. You'll probably fall over. Like it's just you're not meant to do that. So you have to pause and breathe and look all the way up. And it's just a good moment of like, where am I? Who am I? Whose am I? Like these things that go through you. It happens when you're on a mountain. It happens when you're looking at a big, vast, on the shore of the ocean. All these moments where you just pause. And I think there are buildings that do that to us. There awe can be found in architecture as well, of course. But so much of it comes from the created world, the bigness and the smallness, like seeing new blossoms and seeing, all these things that I don't know. I love so I think nature is one of those things that for me helps me reconnect with my place in creation when I start getting either thinking I'm not enough or too much, right? Like either way, it centers me in where I am. Like if I think I'm too awesome or if I think I'm not enough, it like helps me be like, here's your place. Don't forget you're a part of this whole bigger thing.
I think what you said about the incarnation is beautiful and reminds us like, hey, God had a body and all of that. How does the incarnation help us and remind us that our own bodies are good?
When God chose to be with us, I mean, God chose a person. I can't believe it. Like, if you really spend time thinking about it, like the human experience is not great. You're just like it's hard and painful and incredibly beautiful and incredibly joyful. But that if you hold a newborn, I just like one of my really good friends just had a baby and we went and met him this weekend and you're holding this like fresh human and you're like, God chose to do this. Like God did this thing. Like, was this fragile and this vulnerable and limited God's self this much? Like that's unbelievable. And God didn't show up as a tree or a loon or any of these other things as, flowers. Like, and listen, I think loons are pretty awesome. Like, there's lots of creatures God could have shown up as, but didn't. At least maybe. I don't know. We don't know. But God chose to be a person. And and I just think that really matters in the story to say that if this was holy enough for God, then I am holy, right? Like there is a connection to be made that like God chose to show up with skin and bones and a brain and feelings and all the emotions that I have. And there is a beautiful connection to that I think really matters. And then, for me, the next step is like, even in these digital spaces, which people would say disconnect us from each other and like are like I wrote about in the book how they're unembodied spaces. I'm like, no, they're not. Cause I like right now you have a body, I have a body. Like we're both still embodied. And so like I think part of the problem with the digital space is when we start to not see people in the digital space as people, right? That they aren't embodied folks, but they are. They are people that have a life and breath just like you do. And that helps humanize each other a little bit more. It matters. It matters that God chose to show up in a body, so my body also matters to God. And I just think, if bodies didn't matter, God would have chosen a different way to show up. I just think like this is the way. And so when Jesus left and God was like, "Don't worry, I'll stick around." God chose to be breath, and I just think that's really beautiful too, right? So then when people are worried about connecting to God, I often say like God is as close as a breath to you, right? That all you need to do is breathe, and like that is God with you and in you. And I think that can be a little woo woo for some folks, but I do think that like moving, living piece of how God shows up is like a core part of who we are as people. And I think it just means like your breath matters and your body matters. And so like when you settle and you breathe, like it's just a good way to be like, what a gift. I have a body. What a gift. I have breath, right? And like to not take it for granted and to be appreciative for how God shows up through and with those things.
With that and what you said at the beginning,
Mm,
breath work being important to you,
mm.
how do you notice God within breath and breath work? What does it look like for you to pay attention?
I think because the words first breath and spirit are the same, in Hebrew and in Greek. And if I need to reconnect, the breath is where my body and spirit like meet essentially. And so to me, it's like a way to reconnect to who I've been created to be and also to reconnect to the creator who decided I was worth creating, right? And so, like, it's so good, and I think breath is you're just breathing you're breathing all the time. I think a lot of people, there were some there were some lovely ladies at a church I served at were like, "I don't like it when you do the breath stuff before worship," like, when we start, I don't like that, and I was like, "Well, you're breathing all the time, like, you never like, I'd be worried if you weren't," so, like, we're always doing it, but there's something about the pause and the notice and the, like, real intentional connection to remind yourself that it is always there and always happening, but there is something about the practice of, like, paying attention to it
Yeah.
that like, settles and grounds and sort of reconnects my body and spirit together, and I think sometimes, you're just hustle, 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 and you don't realize how shallow you're breathing or how little you're thinking about your space and your personhood or your where you are or what the day is. I mean, I love at weddings and any important moments. I love telling families like take a breath, look around, like notice where you are and like notice the moment, right? Like it really matters to just take a second because we just go from thing to thing, and like breathing just helps us sort of mark a moment that matters. I think.
But I want to mark the moment through my phone.
The practice of not always taking a picture. I mean, my daughter has said so many times, like, Instagram eats first. And I'm like, oh, don't. I'm okay. That's good. That's good. It's good for me to hear you say that when I'm trying to take a picture of whatever I'm eating. Like, okay. Good truth telling from my teenager there.
Natalia, if you could talk to your readers, then what hope do you have for It All Counts?
I mean, I hope it gives people some freedom. I hope it heals that part in little Natalia who was told like you can't pray like you can't do the sign of the cross like that, or my uncle who was told he couldn't ask questions, or that I hope it offers some sort of healing and freedom for folks, and that they feel like I don't know that God hasn't left them behind because they're doing it a certain way or not doing it a certain way, but that God remains and questions with us and walks with us and struggles with us. And to me, I hope people just get I want people to feel free after reading it from whatever has been whatever has been holding them back or giving them shame. I just hope people feel like uh, they really feel the liberation that God is offering all the time. I just think like faith is supposed to unburden us, not burden us, and I hope that for people.
A couple of questions I like to ask at the end. So one, if you go
Yeah.
back to your 21-year-old self, what advice would you give?
Oh my gosh. Oh, girl, it gets better. Yeah, I think I also wish I would have just trusted my inner knowing a little bit more. I think I always knew there was something in me asking me to do what I do now, and I kept her pretty quiet for a while. So yeah, I think it'll be okay, but also that small voice is worth listening to.
How did you stop it from being quiet? How did you start to speak
Mhm.
it and get to a place where you are now?
I think small steps away from what I thought I was supposed to do and trusting what I was feeling. I didn't like quit everything and go in another direction. I like did little baby steps, but I feel like those little baby steps were always reciprocated with like a reminder of yes, like a just a big yes. My friend Ellie always says there's a difference between a it's fine and a full body yes. And she's just like, trust your full body yes. Like your inner it's hard to say like inner knowing without sounding really woo-woo, but it just feels like your whole if you really start to trust your breath and your body and you start paying attention to how your body reacts, like if somebody says something and you feel yourself like it like even if you don't physically lean forward, like something tingles. I just think like it's like trusting that and following it, and I think it took therapy for sure, and some spiritual direction, and then just, like, a trusting that I had the answers, like, if I like, my whole body and spirit were telling me the right thing all along, and I listened to lots of other voices besides my own, and so I think once I was able to pick out my own voice and trust her, I think then I was able to move out.
Anything you've been reading or watching lately you could recommend?
This is a Pandora's box I'm not sure we need to get into, but I do watch, people who have already heard of me. If they've already read or listened to anything I do, they already know that I love Turkish television, and so I'm watching a lot of Turkish television right now, and it's so good. It's a whole genre called DZs, and the summer DZ season is just upon us, and so there are all these shows that are like the year-long shows.
Yeah.
They sort of end their season in June, and all these, like, lighthearted, fluffy non-serious, not anything summer season is upon us, and it's gonna be it's just escapism at its absolute finest. It's the best. I'm like, "Wait, can I pretend I live on the Bosphorus where it's beautiful, surrounded by beautiful people, good food all the time?" That sounds great.
That's awesome. It All Counts will be available anywhere books are sold. People could go and get that. Is there anywhere you'd like to point people to? How could they connect with you and connect with
Uh
what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram pretty regularly, at Nterfa it is, and then, my website is nataliaterfa.com, and that has all the things on there. If you're local to me, it's when I preach around the area, so I get guest preach on occasions. If you wanna come hear me preach, that's all on there. My book release, um, party is in Minneapolis on the 16th of July if you're around at my favorite local bookstore called Moon Palace Books. So if you're in the Twin Cities on July 16th, you can come be with us for a little party, 6:30 PM, I think it is. That's on my website too. And yeah, it's the place you can find all my stuff is on nataliaterfer.com, but also my DMs are open. You can come. Anybody can ask me anything. I'm on Substack. I write there pretty regularly too, and you can find me on all those places.
Awesome. Natalia, thank you for this
Thank you so
conversation.
much.
It was great.
Really appreciate it. Really appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to this episode of Shifting Culture. This show was edited and produced by me, Joshua Johnson, at Shifting Culture Productions. If you're enjoying the conversations, consider supporting the work by subscribing at shiftingculture.substack.com. For as little as $5 a month, you'll get ad-free early access episodes and other exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox. I'd love for you to not just listen, but engage. Reach out, share what's resonating, and let's keep shaping culture together. Whether you're a listener with feedback, a creative with an idea, or a brand looking to connect with a thoughtful, engaged audience, let's talk. If you're interested in advertising on the show, I'd love to hear from you. Contact me directly for rates and availability. Until next time, let's keep shifting culture.